Thank you. Thank you so much. Good morning. I'm delighted to be here. I want to thank Professor Murase, whom I have known for years through other wonderful projects that we have done together. And I'm just so delighted to be invited to such a special workshop. I was telling Professor Murase after his talk that I was very struck by something that he said at the end, and I have spoken to other people about this, and most of you agree. And the idea he put forth, really, the problem for us, for all of us, assignment for us to think about is the notion of creativity exactly in the way that he framed it. That creativity is the emergence of hidden dynamics that is a result of interaction between outside stimuli and internal properties. I hope I got that right. This is actually exactly the way that it should be framed. What Professor Murase did not know is that precisely this problem, and precisely in the way that he framed it, has been in social sciences for a long, long time. You can go back to Plato, and he was musing about problems of human nature precisely in these terms. And precisely because of the way that it's been formulated, just the way we formulate it, and just the way that people like Plato and others have formulated it, it has led to debates, and sometimes debates that are quite debates with rigor and vigor in our fields. And the debate often takes the form, we saw a little bit of it here, of the nature of the internal properties. And there are two questions about those internal properties. One, are there internal properties? Second, are the internal properties sacrosanct and unalterable in the face of external stimuli? I'm not as conversant in the latter question, although I have spoken to a number of people here who have given me wonderful examples where outside stimuli apparently can change internal properties in quite dramatic ways. I guess evolution is one of those. But in linguistics, we can't really talk about evolution in such convincing ways because human linguistic behavior doesn't get fossilized like rocks. Maybe with more recent technologies, we can get into some. The question that has been very, very hotly debated, and it really gave rise to people like Chomsky, is the question, are there internal properties directly relevant to human language and behavior? And this is a debate that has been going on at least for 100 years in social and human sciences. And predictably, there's been two schools of thought, somewhat in sequence, but until the 1950s, the thought was that there are no real internal properties that we can, or we should talk about with regard to human behavior, including linguistic behavior, and that everything is due to external stimuli, behaviorism in social science. And this was very powerful. So people like B.F. Skinner at Harvard had a very important chair at Harvard and had many, many students. But as a counterpoint to that view, people such as Chomsky and others appeared on the scene and said, sure, external stimuli have a way to form much of what we are, but that in itself cannot explain everything. That in itself cannot explain everything. That in order to really, really understand who we are as human beings, to get to the root of human nature, and human language is one of them, that we need to postulate that there are some internal properties common to human beings. and possibly unique to human language. Although that is up for debate. But we believe that there are some very minimal internal properties that account for human linguistic behavior in its core. And the way it has developed since the 1950s up until literally today is that we began with a very rich set of internal properties in the 50s and 60s. And in the 80s, it really occurred to us that because of the richness of the internal properties that we're allowing, we were not really explaining anything. The richness of the internal properties simply allowed us to describe the problems that we were trying to solve. It's a very typical problem. And so starting in the late 1980s, effort has been made to really minimize assumptions about internal properties we have that lead to human linguistic behavior. And when I say human linguistic behavior, as I will go more into detail, I'm talking about very technical behavior having to do with how human expressions are constructed in a formal sense. And I'll show you what I mean by that. Lots of different ways in which one does linguistics, but this is the way that we have done it. Okay. So in order to get started with my talk, I decided to talk about something that gives me a different point of entry for telling you about what I think is human language. What is it that we have when we say that we have human language? We all have it. You know, one of us amazing, puzzling, stunning facts about human language is that every human being, with few exceptions that you could explain by other reasons, every human being has human language. And as far as we can tell, within a community of speakers of a particular language, the knowledge is reasonably uniform so that you can actually use it to do things among the members of the community. And so one of the things we want to explain is why is it that human beings have language? So I want to begin by telling you a little bit about the animal world. The animal world has systems of communication, very well documented systems of communication. I'm going to show you a couple. One is monkeys by the name of vervet monkeys of Kenya. And they have been studied quite extensively by Seyfarth, Cheney, and Mahler, and reported in the 1980 Science article. So I'm going to, that's the Science article from 1980. You can get it online. And this is the vervet monkey vocalization. This is Mark Hauser's website. Mark Hauser is a scholar at Harvard. And so what he did was to take some of the recordings that the three scholars I mentioned made and put it on his website. The three scholars recorded something like 1,500 hours, video and audio, of vervet monkey behavior. And what they concluded was, it was one of those amazing discoveries, is that they appear to have three distinct calls, what they call alarm calls. Here's one. Remember that. It's a life and death situation, as you see in a second. Here's a second one. And a third. these are the three alarm calls that three scientists back in 1980 or earlier, the Journal Science Journal 1980 reported as the three distinct alarm calls that they identified after 1,500 hours of recording. And they also recorded behavior to go. And so this is the alarm call. When one of the members see an eagle approaching. And this is the alarm call. When one of the monkeys sees a snake, and not just any snake, a python approaching. And what you saw here, that's the leopard approaching. So these are the three distinct calls. As far as they can tell, these are the three vocalizations that the Verbex monkeys have, and each is unique, as you can see. And each alarm call coincided with a particular meaning. A leopard is coming, a python is coming, and an eagle is coming. And with each call, there was a communal behavior. So if a monkey did this, the eagle is approaching, then the entire tribe of monkeys would descend from the trees. Whereas when they heard that, they would climb up the trees. And in very, very predictable behavior. Something that they reported sort of as an aside is that they also observed young Verbex monkeys learning these alarm calls. And they sort of had a sense that the eagle call had to do with something, with things flying towards them, and a python, something that's crawling on the ground, and so forth. But they didn't quite get the fact that it's supposed to be an eagle that, for which they are supposed to give a call. And so you can imagine driving parents nuts with these calls. A little bird flying, and then they do this. And all of the parents climb down the tree, and then they look up and it's just a little bird. So, there's this clear one-to-one relationship between the symbol, the vocalization, and the sound. The other thing that, the other example I want to show you are honeybees. Again, very well documented. Honeybees are well known to have a behavior for showing its hive mates where the food is that a honeybee found. Sure.
Honeybees have some fascinating abilities, among them being able to communicate by performing a unique dance. It informs hive mates where a newly discovered food source is located. Every cycle of this waggle dance roughly describes the shape of the figure 8. Let's rewind and look in more detail. The bee only waggles on a part of its route, the straight run, indicated here by the waved line. The secret lies in the direction of the straight run, or to be more precise, in the angle between the straight run and the perpendicular, which in this case is 90 degrees to the left. This tells the other bees that food is available 90 degrees to the left of the sun. If the angle is 60 degrees to the right, they'll be flying 60 degrees to the right of the sun.
It's a very sophisticated form of communication. The bee is aware of where the sun is, where the flower is, and is able to compute the degree, and it's able to convey that information by doing this dance. It is a very, very precise dance. If you're off by a couple of degrees, then your hive mates are not going to find that flower. The dance has two components to it: the angle relative to the sun, and also distance, which is indicated by vibration and also the length of the dance. In another study, it's reported, one of the things one wonders about is these may find a source of food very far away. And they're able to fly quite far away. And by the time they come back, time has elapsed. And they may have, when they found the flower, they may have computed the angle against the sun at that point. They did. But by the time they come back to the hive, time has elapsed. And apparently, bees are able to compute that, according to one study. So the sun moves 1 degree every 4 minutes, and that is somehow computed into this dance. Something else that's well known is that these dances are not identical across all bee populations around the world. So there's been experiments where a researcher would take a bee from a hive in the United States and plant it into a bee population in South America. And this bee will go out, find the flower, come back, and does his or her American dance, and it completely confused the bees. So somehow left means right in South America. So it has dialects as well. But again, despite the complexity of the system, the dance has a very clear component. It has the angle component and the distance component. And this dance, like the alarm calls of the Vertex monkeys, appear to have one utility, and that is to indicate a source of the food. This is not useful for any other purpose. Okay. Okay, so just to emphasize that point, a Vertex monkey alarm call that says a leopard is coming will connect the stimulus, the leopard, and the symbol, the vocalization, and the meaning in a direct linkage. So the vocalization, this is the symbol. Directly connects it to the meaning that a leopard is coming. That vocalization has no other usage. And this is true, as far as we can tell, with even the most complex systems that we find. And we certainly don't know everything. But we think that a unique property of the communication system in the animal world, including bees, is that you have a symbol. And a symbol is a random abstract entity like the vocalization attached to a meaning like leopard. It's always a one-to-one connection. Always a one-to-one connection. It's like a word. A word that only means one thing. So compare that to human language. Now I'm going to start talking about human language. So human language, like the animal communication system, connects some vocalization sounds and some meaning. But the question is that relation, the connection between sound and meaning direct, straight, solid line, like in the Vertex monkeys and also the bees, or is it somehow less direct, and that there's something that mediates this relationship, this connection between sound and meaning? And for those of us who believe that there are internal properties relevant to human language, whether or not it's dedicated to human language, or maybe it's not dedicated to human language, but the human behavior that we observe, we believe that connects sound and meaning is mediated by something, so that sound and meaning is not a direct linkage. There's something going on inside this thing here that is making this connection possible, and in a way that is not direct, like we find in the animal. So what is inside this box? What is the internal property? It's being observed for for centuries that a defining property of human language is that it's potentially infinite. Say potentially infinite is in fact infinite. A number of people you've heard about have made this observation. People like Galileo, Descartes, Humboldt, and others, that it's potentially infinite. Now I'll tell you exactly what that means. I'm going to be depending a lot on this science article by Hauser, Chomsky, Macaulay, and Fitch. Hauser and Fitch are at Harvard. We saw Hauser's website with the Harvard exponents. This is a wonderful article, very readable. It was written for non-linguists. So you can read, and it's very, very extensive. And so I'm going to be drawing from this article as well as some work from my home for the remaining of the paper. Potentially infinite. If this is true, if we can prove this, then right away we can show that the human language, because of this infinite property, is different, fundamentally different from the animal world, where the animal world communication system is clearly different, clearly not infinite. That it's very narrow in its usage. One symbol, one meaning, and the symbols are limited in number. 3, maybe 4, 5, maybe even 100, okay? But limited. The human language is limited. So let me give you 2 simple ways in which we can show the human language is limitless. A limitless one is the length of expression. So, imagine trying to produce the longest sentence in the world. So here's my attempt at that. John thinks that Mary believes that her son said that Bob thought that the professor will hand out the physics one. It's a very long sentence. You probably don't want to use such a long sentence in a conversation. But is this the longest sentence in the world? No. You can always make it longer. You can always make it longer. You can make it longer by putting something in front of it. He thinks that John thinks that Mary thinks. Or you can simply say, Mark. You can always trump what someone will tell you is the longest sentence in the world with something that's longer. So, there is no longest sentence. It's infinite in its potential. Very familiar from natural numbers. So that's one kind of limitlessness. We think that this has something to do with that internal property that mediates sound. The other kind of limitlessness is the combinations that are possible. So here are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 words that boy will show up film. And using these 6 words, how many sentences, let's say without repeating a word within the same sentence, which is very artificial because we use the same word in the same sentence all the time. But just to make it even harder, how many sentences, how many combinations can we produce out of these 6 words? I did this with my undergraduate linguistics class last week, and they came up with many more sentences than I was able to think of on the spot. Now here's something. That boy will show a film. A boy will show that film. Will that boy show a film? Will a boy show that film? That boy will film a show. A boy will film that show. Will that boy film a show? Will a boy film that show? Show a film that boy will. Film a show that boy will. And so there are others that you can create. So out of 6 words, we were able to come up with 10 perfectly good English sentences. And we put an artificial constraint that you cannot repeat a word. If you could repeat a word, for example, repeat the twice, then you get a few more. If you can repeat up, a definite article twice, then you get more, and so forth. And so just with 6 words, you get many, many more than that. And so how many words are there in a human language? So how many words do you think you know as an English speaker who is educated? A typical high school graduate will know roughly 60,000 words. And this is without sitting down to study the hard words that you have to know for the entrance exams. No, those are not part of this. This is learning words effortlessly. And you have about 60,000 words. This is what you use. So you can imagine with 6 words, we were able to produce 10 plus sentences. In fact, we could double that number if we were to do this in a natural way, repeating words and so forth. 60,000 words, and the combinations that become possible are, in fact, and again, lifting this unnatural regulation that you cannot repeat a word. We repeat words all the time. We used to say, it's not like a word has a lifetime of 1 utterance. That would be a terrible thing. We would stop talking after 2 years of life. We use words over and over again. So 60,000 words, being able to use over and over again, that's pretty good. So those are the 2 kinds of infinite properties that have been observed in natural language for centuries. And these are the 2 properties that intrigue us as students in trying to understand what that internal property is that appears to connect sound. Incidentally, I say sound and meaning just out of convention, but it's important to point out that sound is the most typical, the most common way in which human language is externalized, as I'm doing right now. But there are other external systems. The well-known one that comes to mind is the sign language of the hearing impaired. And the sign language of the hearing impaired has been studied quite extensively recently. There have been doctoral dissertations. It's been shown without any doubt that sign language of the hearing impaired has exactly the same properties that spoken language has. It has the same syntax. It has even things like agreement, subject-verb agreement. Interestingly, even in the spoken language that doesn't have agreement, the sign language has. So Japanese is one of those languages that doesn't have a subject-verb agreement. You don't have to worry about whether to say John runs versus they run. It's all, the verb run is run, regardless of how many people are your subject. No agreement, no gender agreement, and no person agreement. Okay? But it turns out that Japanese sign language has agreement exactly of the sort we find in the European. In fact, even richer agreement than what you find even in languages like Canada, which has a richer agreement system than English. So there's something very puzzling about it. But very clearly, sign language is a modified externalization of this human language potential, just as we vocalize it. So combinations virtually limitless. In fact, it is limitless. Okay. So what is behind this language's infinity, if we are right on the right track? The way that philosophers have talked about this is to define it in the following way. Human language is infinite use of finite meanings. We saw the idea of infinite use. Infinite use because you can create sentences that are infinitely long. And expressions that have infinite variety of combinations of words. Literally infinite. Incidentally, you might wonder if it's possible, if we all have the potential to produce infinitely long sentences, why don't we do that? Well, that has nothing to do with human linguistic potential. It has things to do with social etiquette, memory limitation, lung capacity, things very much external to the linguistic system. The linguistic system itself has the potential to give you the infinite. Right? So, just to cut to the chase at this point, the idea of creativity in terms of a human linguistic system, the creativity that we find in the human linguistic system is very clear. It's observed for centuries. Is the idea that human linguistic system allows you to have infinite power of expression. It does not bog you down. You are free to have thoughts, creative thoughts, without getting ever bogged down by human language, because human language itself is capable of infinite expression. Infinite use of finite means, so why do we say that, infinite use of finite means? Why do we have to say finite means? Well, it's simple. But in a way, in the same way that we can observe that human language has these infinite properties of length and variation, we can make another very different kind of observation about human language. We can make it right here in this room. That is that we all master human language. We master it completely. The only thing that we keep learning beyond the age of 6 or 7, by the time you're 6 or 7, you pretty much have your language intact. The only thing that you keep adding to it are words. Words. And that you do for the span of your life. You keep adding words, you keep forgetting words. As you get older, you keep forgetting words, and you don't get to add as much. But the actual system, whatever that system is, that generates the infinity of human language, is pretty much there by the time you're 5 or 6. What does that mean? Well, that means that you can learn it. And that means that it has to be finite. If it's to be mastered, it's got to be finite. You cannot learn something that's an infinite system because there is no boundary to master something that's an infinite system. The system can give you infinite use of its resources, but the resources themselves must be finite. So this has been the assumption behind this internal property of the linguistics called universal grammar. It's a finite property that contributes to human behavior, linguistic behavior. So let me just show you what the inside of that barrel might look like. So take a simple example like the 2 big blue cars. Everyone understands that. Every language has expressions like this. The 2 big blue cars. When you look at this, it has a very particular property. So you begin with, let's say, blue cars. And here, you have blue modifying cars. And here you cannot say much because you just have 2 things. But once you build it up to 3 things, now you notice something. You say big blue cars has a particular structure to it, such that big modifies not the adjacent element, blue. You don't mean big blue here. You mean big blue cars. Keep going again. 2 big blue cars doesn't mean this linear adjacent relationship of 2 big. That's not what you mean. You mean 2 of big blue cars. And that 2 big blue cars doesn't mean that 2, but that and then 2 big. So there is, on the surface, you have a linearization of sounds and words. It's just flat. But when you think about, when you reflect on the meaning that we associate on these expressions, it's not meaning. That's the idea. It's not meaning. And so what's inside that barrel is something that we think is an operation that is recursive output of that sort. With a little hierarchy built into it, a little structure that gets built into it. This, today, present-day linguistic theory, this, we think, is the most basic operation that takes place inside that the universal grammar. A very simple, stripped down notion of internal property of human language. So let's see how this works. If you take, again, the two big blue cars, the way we see this expression being built up is you take two elements, blue, which is A, and cars, which is B, and you build this little hierarchy. And now, when you are ready to add the third element, big, you would add big, not to blue, but to this abstract structure that you built. So this node here. So this node is B, and this node is A. And we keep going. B, A, B, A. And this structure, we think, explains the meaning that we all share with the big blue cars. So dot will modify not two, and not big, and not blue, but this node that represents this entire sequence, two big blue cars. Two doesn't modify big or blue. The two modifies this node here, which represents the amalgam of big blue cars. And so meaning, the way we interpret the idea of sound, meaning, linkage, meaning actually operates not on these linear words, but on these abstract entities that have been built with this very simple procedure. And looks at these abstract nodes and computes meaning on the basis of those. I'll give you other examples of how the structure is used. But this operation, as you can see, is recursive. You can keep doing this all day long, and you get infinitely long sentence if that's what you want to do. You can also see that you can get infinite combinations because you can pick up any two elements and combine them. The only thing that constrains you, and that's outside of this system, is meaning. And you just have to worry about meaning once you create this to make sure that the meaning makes sense. So the source of creativity as far as human language is concerned is the human language generates these binary hierarchical structures for the type of so A and B by combining words and phrases. The structure that can generate it is potentially infinite because this operation is recursive. And this leads to creativity of the kind that I talked about, the limitless potential of human expression. So the way that we see human linguistic structure built is exactly like this. It doesn't just go in one direction up. You can build phrases like this, separate from the structure, and then once you build up a big phrase like this, you can plug it into an existing structure of this sort. But from everything that we can tell, empirical studies that we have done, the linguistic system has this binary property. It's always binary. It's very difficult, probably impossible, to find branchings that are tripartite. People have thought that they found such a thing, but on closer examination, it turns out that it's binary. So it's something like John and Mary, which seems like just a perfectly good example of a three-member set. That turns out to not be a three-member set, but when you look at the way they're combined, it's not John and Mary equally placed, and Mary combined together first. And then that and Mary combines with John. There have been studies that show this is the right way to build up the structure. So human language, for reasons sentences that we don't fully understand appears to have this strictly binary structure. Okay, so we saw that interpreting meaning of a sentence takes advantage of these abstract nodes that are built up by the binary recursive rules. There are other operations in human language that take advantage of this, and then I'll close with this. There are these operations in human language that we call movement operations. So metaphorically speaking, you'll see exactly what it is in just a second. So you can take a sentence like John bought a book. A book, we know, is the object of the verb, the transitive verb, to buy. So it has that meaning. It's not the subject, but the object. In languages like English, there are also sentences like number 2. What did John buy? This what has at least 2 functions. First, it indicates that it's a question. The person who utters this expression is asking of you for some information. And what shows that function by occurring in languages like English at the head of the sentence. So that's one function. But the other function that what has is exactly the same function that a book has. That is that what is the object of what. We know that. In order to understand this question, we have to understand that what is the object of what. And so the way we think about this is that what is really in 2 places. It's here, it's pronounced here. But we also have to interpret it somehow here to understand it's the object of the verb buy. And there are tests to show that although this is silent, you don't hear anything, that in fact we are interpreting something. People do behavioral and also neuro-linguistic studies to show that in fact in human linguistic behavior we are actually interpreting something here that we suspect corresponds to the point. And so we talk about this as a movement rule. What begins here, you know. Yeah, but what has been shown is that this kind of movement operation targets not words, but these abstract, binary abstract structures that you feel. So, for example, here you see 2 nodes. One is A and the other is B, and we'll see that there are moving operations that will target one of those. So, this book every student certainly will read. This is a typical capitalization structure in English. This book has been moved, if you will, from the object position of read, and this operation targets that node, A node. You cannot, for example, just take a part of this node and say, this, every student certainly will read book. That's not English. Or the other way, book, every student certainly will read this. That's not English either. So, again, these operations work not on the words, but on these nodes. And for B, read this book, every student certainly will. Another example, but now it's talking about B. So, one of the things that we do in linguistics, and what I do, is to look at these kinds of operations in natural language to see if we can identify exactly what the property of these binary structures are. And to confirm, in fact, that these binary structures exist, and to see how the internal property of human language exploits this structure. For example, in creating questions, forming questions exploits. And there are many, many, many other kinds of human expressions where the abstract binary structure is exploited to make the expression. Okay, there are many more things that I really wish I could tell you, but I think I'm almost out of time, so let me just close out by saying that the debate that has been going on in linguistics is very much the debate that Professor Murase set out in his opening remarks. The idea of external stimuli and internal properties. it is well documented that linguistic behavior, whether you believe that there is an internal property like universal grammar or not, you must be exposed to data during a critical period. Maybe up to 7, maybe 10, 8, maybe 12, there's some individual differences. But once you get past the critical period, you're not able to master the language in a way that you can master the first language. And so, as an adult, for most of us, to try to start a foreign language at the age of 45 or something, it's a struggle. In a way that a 3-year-old, for a 3-year-old, it's not. It's a qualitatively different person. So, external stimuli is critical. And this is true in many modes of human behavior. The question is that external stimuli forming everything that we see about human language, or is it triggering something that is inside, such as what I suggested that we have, an internal property, a universal grammar, a very simple mechanism, but it gets triggered by exposure to it's a debate, and it's not something that will be solved anytime soon. This is one way to look at it. Thank you very much.